Good evening. I'm James Roth, Deputy Director of the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. And on behalf of my colleague Stephen Rothstein, Executive Director of the Kennedy Library Foundation, and all my library and foundation colleagues, thank you for coming this evening. I'd like to acknowledge the generous support of our underwriters for the Kennedy Library Forums, lead sponsor Bank of America, the Lowell Institute, and our media sponsors, the Boston Globe, Xfinity, and WBUR. I'm also delighted to welcome all of you who are watching tonight's program online, including those of you who have gathered at the John F. Kennedy Hyannisport Museum. It always gets a good hi. We look forward to a robust question and answer period this evening, and when Q&A starts, we will invite those of you who are joining us in person tonight to proceed to the microphones in the aisles to ask your questions. If you are in overflow seating at the library but have a question, our staff can help you proceed to the main hall to reach these microphones at that time. Chris Matthews has kindly agreed to sign books after tonight's forum. Our bookstore has copies of his most recent book available for purchase if you're interested. Robert F. Kennedy's career in public service and work towards a better world continues to inspire, and we could not be more pleased to explore his life and work through the lens of a new book, Bobby Kennedy, A Raging Spirit, which one reviewer described as, quote, revealing his essential role in his brother's success and the trajectory of his own life in politics, end quote. Tonight, I am pleased to welcome Chris Matthews, author of Bobby Kennedy, A Raging Spirit, and the well-known host of MSNBC's Hardball with Chris Matthews, and the author of 8 books. Chris has a distinguished career in journalism and in government service, including his service as a presidential speechwriter to Jimmy Carter, a top assistant to Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill, and a member of the Peace Corps. I'm also delighted to introduce our moderator for the evening. Martin Nolan was a renowned reporter and editor for the Boston Globe from 1961 to 2001. He grew up in Dorchester, and we are pleased he is here with us again this evening. Please join me in welcoming Chris and Marty.
Well, Chris, in this fine book, you mention places reference their role in the 1968 college campuses. You have Notre Dame, you have the University of San Francisco, you have Ball State in Muncie, Indiana, you have UNC and Holy Cross, which I think is in Worcester, yes.
There's a lot of Holy Cross in this book.
Yes, I know,
There's a lot
everybody.
of it.
I didn't see Clarence Thomas
Except we
show up,
skipped the
but-
David I. Walsh reference.
Yes,
That's the
right.
only one we skipped.
And
We got all the other guys in there.
So let's play hardball. Why should a college sophomore today be interested in a guy who has been dead for 49 years?
Because I think 3 reasons. One is empathy, that I think you know what you don't have when you don't have it. And I think you begin to realize, you know, from the time we were watching Robin Hood, remember when King Richard the Lionheart would show up and straighten things out? You know, you need to have a president who, when he comes on the scene and knows what's going on, will fix things right because he's following good and evil as a standard, as a compass. And I think Bobby had empathy. I think he had it because he was sort of the, if not the black sheep of the family, he was the runt, the little guy, 5'8". His brothers were strapping big guys. The father was focused all on Joe Jr. and then Jack in that order, but he never really focused on Bobby till Bobby toughened up the way he wanted him to be toughened up. And I think he understood what it was like to be the outsider, the overlooked, the runt. And I think he always talked about the Irish experience, which was pretty distant at that point. No Irish need apply. It was pretty distant to the Kennedy railroad car heading to Bronxville, you know, wasn't that rough? But he kept talking about the Irish thing as his his downtrodden experience. But really it was being the son of Joe Kennedy. He was a pretty formidable person, to put it lightly. I think the other thing's missing today besides empathy is unity. I think Bobby always tried to unite. I mean, there he was the night the king was killed, and he's telling a black crowd in a tough neighborhood, we got to make an effort. He kept saying, we got to make an effort. He didn't say black and white are going to have parties together and hang out together. He said, we got to make an effort to end this divide. Just make an effort. And the president we have now goes the other direction. He's always trying to enjoy that division, whether it's over the taking a knee or it's over the statues, whatever he can grab handy. He says, this is a good way to divide and get my 40%. That's all I want is my 40%. And the third thing is, well, I'll leave it at that. Empathy and unity. I think that's what we need in presidents, no matter what their party politics, and we don't have it. And I think the kids today would like it.
One of the things that's in this book that's different from a lot of biographies. A lot of biographies stick with the guy, and he's, and anything that happens outside his circle. But you provide context with a lot of names going back to the whole Joe McCarthy investigations and all that. I mean, references are very important. When I got out of college, in Boston College in 1961, a good pal of mine, George V. Higgins, the novelist, we talked about that. People don't make reference to what we know. And George and I talked about going on dates. George was going to law school, and I was covering police headquarters for the Globe. And George came in one night and said, I got it. I said, what do you got? He says, I will no longer go out with a woman who's never heard of Alger Hiss.
I love it.
I thought of that because Alger Hiss is in this book, along with many other people.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's some people that people really don't know, except if Paul Corbin, who had a voice like this, Paul Corbin's voice came out of the sewers, and a lot of people thought his accent came in through. Guy from Wisconsin. But why did you have so many different people in it?
Well, I wanted to start the book. First of all, it's about a soul of a guy developing his soul. And I don't see many people with the book here. If you're not going to buy the book, go look at it at least, all right? Jesus. It's a beautiful book. Unlike the galleys, the back of the book has this incredible sight of a working class family, a poor family on the back, watching the train go by, which is what's lost in the Democratic Party today. The working class whites, affectionate patriotism for people like their leaders. They don't even see them as people they like, let alone have affection for as fellow patriots. And there they are saluting Bobby, and the African Americans, of course, singing Battle Hymn of the Republic. This affection that the white and black communities both had for the same leader is something in the past. I wanted to show that. Anyway, there's a lot you have to actually go buy the book. It's easier. And you can actually, it's the most beautiful book I have ever seen. And I mean it. I wanted it to be beautiful.
Okay.
What was that question? I wanted to do this. First of all, it's the dramatis personae. You know that Stevenson's going to be important. You know that Joe McCarthy's going to be important. You know that Gene McCarthy is going to be important, and certainly LBJ. So I start picking them up chronologically. So I'll say in 1946, when Jack gets elected, Jack Kennedy wins up here for the U.S. House. That's the same year Joe McCarthy wins out in Wisconsin as, Tail Gunner Joe. I wanted to show his development. He ran against his opponent, calling him soft on communism. He started very early. I wanted to show Gene McCarthy. I always liked Gene McCarthy. And Gene McCarthy, I wanted to develop him as a parallel figure, how he ran against the Popular Front, real hard left crowd in his primary back in 48, and how he had to beat them. We think of him as a man of the left, but certainly the moderate left. And he had to beat the hard left in the early Cold War period, and he did it. I wanted to show how he came up in the DFL, the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. So I wanted to show them all coming along together, and then they start mixing. And then you realize who they are. The the Bobby Kennedy fight with LBJ started in 40. So, I wanted to be able to count and bring them all together as characters. There are very few characters. It's not a Russian novel, this book. There's maybe 10 people in the whole book that keep coming back in. Stevenson keeps coming back in all through the book. And Gene McCarthy, a real rival of the Kennedys. He was bitterly resentful of them. And he keeps coming back in. Guess who Bobby liked most, Joe or Gene McCarthy? Joe. Read the book.
To this day in the United States, say you're on the Upper West Side of New York, you're on Amsterdam Avenue, you'll see Democrats cross the street to remind them that they were on the wrong side of Gene McCarthy versus Bobby Kennedy.
Yeah,
they
they
still
were
remember.
Gene, they're still
and
Gene.
all over the country, in Beverly Hills and all the places, real
Well, one of the
lefty
reasons
Democrats.
Bobby got in trouble was that, he had to get the Jewish vote out in California because all the Jewish intellectuals were all for Gene McCarthy. So he became a flame-throwing pro-Israeli guy. I mean, really, Gene McCarthy was so bitter about that afterwards. We were sitting at Duke Zeber's one day at lunchtime, and he's so Irish. He's looking down, I don't believe what that guy did to me. You won't believe what he did to me. And he's still angry years later about when Bobby ran the campaign. And he said, he said, we were already giving the Israelis the F-15s. We're already giving them to them under the table. Why do we have to give them over the table? And he demagogued the issue. Gene was really mad about that one.
But that's why my question is about today's Democratic Party. Now here is, the echoes.
Same deal.
Same deal. Well, as they say, how does the Democratic Party get out of this? Or in other words, tell me something I don't know.
Well, Donna Brazil's not going to bring them together, I can tell you that. Jesus, she is throwing the puck out, Go for it, guys. I don't know. I've written 8 books. I've never ratted anybody out. I don't believe in that kind of writing. I don't get it. Anybody can tell stories from the inside because you're on the inside. It's not creative. It's not great. It's just, I don't think that thing serves any good right now to tell people that that she was going to bump Hillary from the ticket. What? Some interim appointed party person is going to bump somebody who's just been nominated? That the wacko editor that let that go the first time, whoever put that story out on the wires or whatever, that she had the authority to do that was crazy. Yeah. And then she pulls back and she said, I didn't mean that.
I do believe it was on the weekend, Chris. It makes a difference.
I was positive it was the weekend. Yeah, that's where the weekend people don't know who Al Hiss is.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. By the way, the Kennedys all agree. Everybody, Pat Moynihan always said that the trouble with government's penchant for secrecy is that they had the Venona tapes on Hiss and a few others like Elizabeth Bentley. They knew they were Reds. They knew they were working for the Soviet Union under Moscow discipline, and they didn't put it out. And so we argued about something like that for 50 years.
Well, here's a question about the Democratic Party. The Kennedy era began in presidential politics in 1960. Kennedy versus Richard Nixon, and then ended really in 1980, Ted Kennedy losing to President Carter. The Clinton era began in 1992, and it's still going on, isn't it? How long does it last? The Clinton, it's kind of your job.
It ought to end.
That's it. When does it end? Because, of course, Trump wants to keep Clinton in the news.
Well, he brings her back the way the Red Chinese would always bring back some bourgeois guy from the past and haul him out. And then they hate him again, They do that to Clintons. I'm waiting for Biaggi to make a comeback. I always say, well, what was it exactly that she did wrong? Help me here. We get casualties all the time. We get casualties in Niger. Guys who fought in the military go out to these horrible places, and some of them get killed overnight. And surprise attacks. Attacks are usually surprise attacks. What is this we're talking about here? And they're just playing with hatred. They know people hate Hillary, so they give them enough. They keep feeding it.
Yeah, but who promoted Major Perez? You forgot.
I know that's in there too.
That's another one.
McCarthy ended up being
Joe McCarthy.
Well, there's so much to Joe McCarthy that. And my favorite part of the story is Bobby's affection for Joe McCarthy, because the first year he worked for him, and he actually did good work for that committee. People like Doris Fleeson, as I say in the book, the good liberal columnist said that was the only good work Joe McCarthy did, was discovering, thanks to Bobby, how the British were basically supplying strategic materials to the Red Chinese while the Red Chinese were fighting the Americans and the British in Korea. What was that about? And Bobby exposed that whole thing. And really made Onassis mad too. I didn't get that into it, but Aristotle Onassis didn't like that. He was one of the Greek shippers. And then, and then he turned on McCarthy because McCarthy was going crazy because of Roy Cohn. And there was a wonderful moment in the book where I don't think I talked to Ethel about it, and she said, yeah, you're right. Bobby said that Roy Cohn took Joe McCarthy up onto a mountain and showed him all the beautiful things he could have if he just went along with this horrible campaign of his. And I said, that's St. Matthew. That's in the New Testament. The devil took Jesus up onto a mountain and showed him all the beauties of the world he was going to give him if he bowed down before him. I said, Bobby thought Roy Cohn was the devil. And I think he did. Yeah. And so that fight went on. When he went to work on the Democratic side of that committee, Roy Cohn said, who was a bit narcissistic, he said he came back just to get me. But he also kept his affection for Joe to the point where when Joe drank himself to death over those 3 years, he would go see him all the time. I've got great accounts from Lem Billings, his friend, how he would go and sit with the McCarthys at their house, Joe and his young wife, and he'd be in a stupor the whole time. And he'd just chat as if he was okay, just to show his affection for the guy. And he'd write in his diary, Joe McCarthy drunk the last 3 hearings. And when they're in the car, the best story was Kathleen told me, she's 6 years old, his oldest daughter. They're driving into National Airport, and over the car radio comes the news that he's finally done it. He was drinking to the end. He finally killed himself with booze, Joe McCarthy. And Bobby was so distraught that he drove around the airport 3 times. He just kept driving around. He couldn't get it out of him. And he snuck off to the funeral and went right to the gravesite, keeping it secret. His affection for McCarthy was so total. And his 2 brothers, Jack and Teddy both said, when they were asked, what's your brother about? They said that's what made Bobby Bobby, his total loyalty, personal loyalty.
Liz Carpenter, when she was Deputy Press Secretary to President Lyndon Johnson, said of the 2 McCarthys, well, here's Bobby Kennedy finally coming out against McCarthy, but the wrong one. He came out against Gene. And you treat Gene McCarthy a lot better than some biographers do, because many biographers say, well, this guy from Minnesota is just in the way. But actually, you said it was very impressive because the guy did it alone with no, I was there when McCarthy was at a Foreign Relations Committee meeting, and Fulbright is just giving up, said, well, why did you confirm this nomination? So they'll just send us somebody worse. And McCarthy whispered something to nobody in particular. He said, we have to take this to the nation. We have to take this to the country. I said, what? What'd you say? And he just walked off. And I said, what's he talking about? A couple of weeks later, a guy nobody expected to run for president did, but he did it on conviction, and he did very well in New Hampshire, much to everyone's surprise, including Bobby's.
Bobby took a long time to accept Gene McCarthy's importance. The rivalry was very strong and Irish and everything else. And it wasn't until the election that he won at the end, right before he was shot, that he said to Richard Goodwin, well, first of all, Dave Hackett came to him, and people say, would Bobby have won? Well, that's a tough question to answer because, and maybe not with the right answer people want to hear, because he called Dave Hackett in, and Hackett was his classmate at Milton, and he kept all the numbers. And he started going over the delegates the night they won in California, and he said, do we have enough? And he said, no, we cannot win if we split the anti-war vote. Yeah. You cannot beat Humphrey because Hump had all the machine guys like Jim Tate of Philly and Dick Daley and all those guys. All the machine people were still with the war and with Humphrey. And he said, we got to get him out of the race or we're going to lose. And he said, okay, we got to offer him Secretary of State. He's been a better candidate than I thought. We'll get him Secretary of State, which is what Jack offered Adlai unsuccessfully. Yeah. It didn't work. I don't think Gene would have taken it because the deal was you have to quit the race right now. I don't think after coming in close in California was he going to quit because he could have carried New York. Gene McCarthy, you mentioned the West Side. They loved him.
New York, that's another question I have. Do you think Robert Kennedy would have gotten the nomination? I don't think so. My reporting.
But the only thing is how the whole world, it's like sliding doors. Everything would have been different. If that summer Bobby had fought the entire summer chasing Hubert's ass all around the country is what he said he was going to do. If he had done that the whole summer going into Chicago and then arrived instead of a bunch of kids throwing turds at cops and stuff like that, this horrible thing that went on, horrible stuff that went on both sides, it would have been Bobby coming in, maybe being able to pull an upset on the floor with a lot of those people from the Wisconsin delegation, some of those guys, Peterson and the rest of them, that maybe they could have really turned, because the war was turning pretty bad, that things could have dynamically changed everything, and Daley could have switched. Instead of being mad at Ribicoff, he would have been for Bobby Kennedy. I just think the excitement of Bobby Kennedy walking into the '64 convention would have been matched in '68. It would have been such a dramatic moment. I don't know. I don't know whether things could have changed.
That night in Chicago, I was there. I was there in the convention. I was there in Michigan Avenue, and I witnessed the police riot. And at the end of the primaries, Hubert H. Humphrey received 3% of the vote in all the primaries, and he won the nomination. Yeah. Kennedy and McCarthy split the other. Tells you how different a time it was. But Humphrey had the men. I was in New York when Bobby was killed in Los Angeles, because our trick then, way to divide things was we had somebody in the next primary. And I was like, when he was in Oregon, I was in California. And when California, I would have to cover New York because it was the next primary. And I'll tell you, it was going to be very tough for Bobby, which I think he wasn't even going to campaign. He was going to take a European tour just to show he was famous. Well, we already knew that. So I was always wondered, if he couldn't win the New York primary, could he have won the nomination?
He wasn't a natural fit with the West Side, the intellectuals. They saw him as Irish, Tammany, and he didn't like the New York Times. As he said to Breslin the night he was killed, the ideal New York Times headline would be "More nuns leave convent."
Yes, right. He's anti-Catholic.
And the Carrie family, Governor Carrie's family, also thought the New York Times was anti-Catholic. You figure, you know, the WASPs and the Jewish people, the intellectuals, they thought the Irish were all Tammany types, hacks. It was an interesting old tribal war, but it's all part of life.
Well, before we start the audience questions, I do want you to read from page 392 in this edition.
It's all the same.
It's all the same. Well,
Galleys they stay true to the numbers.
Tell us what John Glenn had a difficult assignment after Bobby was killed, and what did he do?
Let me read it. I'll read it because it's more poetic than I can do it. It's about the night he was shot, and they didn't know whether he'd make it. Ethel asked John Glenn, their close friend, to take 5 of the kids back to Hickory Hill while they waited in the hospital, Good Samaritan Hospital, to see what was going to happen. And so, like we always do, if you ever stay overnight at somebody's house, you go right, at least guys do this, you go right to the library. Yeah. And you always try to figure out what they read and see if they have your stuff, and if you've written anything, make sure they do.
That's right.
And then
so
you sort of take
the
them. So I wanted it. So this part came.
There's a local angle here, Chris. This is from a Concord resident named Ralph Waldo Emerson that Bobby was reading. So what?
On the morning after the shooting, Ethel Kennedy had asked her friends John Glenn and his wife Annie to take 6 of her children back across the country to Virginia. With Ethel at the hospital that Wednesday morning, it fell to Glenn to tell them what had happened. And here's John. We flew back across the country in an Air Force jet dispatched by the president, Glenn would write. We took the kids out to Hickory Hill and stayed the night with them. I was in Bobby's study when I saw on his desk a collection of Ralph Waldo Emerson's poems and essays. Leafing through it, I saw he'd marked in the margin a pair of passages he liked. Quote, if there's any period one would wish to be born in, is it not the age of revolution, when the old and the new stand side by side and admit of being compared, when the energies of all men are searched by fear and by hope, when the historic glories of the old can be compensated by the rich possibilities of the new era. This time, like all times, is a very good one if we but know what to do with it. And then there was another quote, always do what you are afraid to do.
So that was Bobby was a very, you mentioned Camus in here. I knew Bobby pretty well. I referred to him as the 13th senator from New England, which is why I covered him so much, which didn't bother him at all. And he's walking across the Capitol grounds, and he has a book. I said, well, that's a fancy book. What is it? Albert Camus. I said, Camus?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, I got this out of the Library of Congress. I said, well, I imagine it's not a long wait list for this among your other, you know. And I said, Camus, he said, have you read Camus? I said, well, you know, in French, you know, L'Étranger is a great novel and all that. And the Sisyphean myth in which the first sentence says, you know, there's only one serious problem in life, and that's that of suicide. Is that what you're into now? He said, no, there's better stuff in it, so unusual.
Well, he did say that was what changed his view of capital punishment, although he's a big law and order guy. He said that Camus taught him that when you execute somebody for murder even, that you basically punish the entire family in the same way that victims of murder, their whole families are victimized. And he didn't want to add to the victimhood. That was his argument. He said that came of me reading Camus.
Yeah. Well, we're going to let him finish with questions. I think we have questions from there. How do we do this here? I can't see.
It can't be.
Are there questions?
Let us see you. That would help.
Yeah, that would lights up.
I have a question.
I can keep going, but
I don't know. Can we raise the cast lights a little so there can be a two-way reality here?
Hello, I'm at the mic here on your right. I have a question.
I see it.
okay.
All right, good. Good. I happen to be one of those Jews from the Upper West Side who now...
Right. We always want diversity here. That's good.
Welcome. There you go.
My name's Carrie.
See, the lights are on for you.
I'm vice chair of the Eleanor Roosevelt Val Kill Partnership.
Great.
I worked for Bobby Kennedy when he ran for Senate. The Upper West Side was a really supportive area for him. So I'm wondering how you come to the conclusion that we would not have supported him in 1980. Thank you.
He's a Tammany guy, basically, is what he is. He's from Philadelphia, but he's
Shep Guy. Let me try and think. Who was Breslin's?
Jimmy's.
His wife?
She was the city councilor. Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, he had some support on the West Side. Clearly, he had people on the West Side, at least of the high IQ of the West Side, and Adam Walensky and people like Peter Edelman, certainly Walensky, who wrote the Cape Town speech. He was, Moynihan held that against him. He said he was a prisoner of these new intellectuals around him who send him off to support all these exotic social concerns instead of sticking with the usual crowd. So he was already being critical. Moynihan had no tact about this. He was attacking him. He wrote a letter to his brother Ted after Bobby had been killed saying Bobby blew it. They didn't keep the old team together enough. And I think Bobby did a really hard effort to keep the old Democratic coalition together. He worked very hard at it. That's what I love about him.
Pat Moynihan was a regular Democrat. He was a member of the Samuel J. Tilden regular Democratic Club in Manhattan. Question. Yes, sir.
Thank you. First, thank you for writing the book. The day I graduated college, I remember so clearly the sound over the radio of people chanting "Goodbye, Bobby," as the train was pulling in, I think, to Newark Station. But if you could talk about the incident at Roseburg, Oregon, on May 28th, 1969. 68. It's depressing because of what happened. I was reading it yesterday.
Again this weekend.
I was reading it. There are no such thing as coincidences. I was reading the exact passage when the news came in about the tragedy in Texas. How little has changed, and I think in 50 years, somebody's going to be writing the same thing about what happened in Texas.
I just wrote another column on it. In Roseburg, which of course is the scene of one of the very many mass killings of recent years, Bobby Kennedy spoke there 10 days before he was shot. And he was warned by the sheriff, don't talk gun control. There's a whole bunch of lumberjacks here. They're very gun-oriented. They're all Second Amendment. They don't say Second Amendment back then. They just said pro-gun people. And you better not do it. So he walked out and he gave a pro-gun control speech right in their face, which is very Bobby, just like talking to students about they shouldn't have their deferments. He was very direct with people, and he challenged them. He was not a pander bear at all, unlike almost every politician today is. And he said, you got to do guns. And he talked about the case of mail-order rifles, like the one that killed his brother, a mail-order rifle. And he talked about the ridiculous case. It may have been apocryphal. It seems crazy that somebody on death row ordered a rifle, and they brought it. This post office delivered it. I have no idea what klutz in the post office. It's a rifle. I know it's a rifle, but he ordered it, and I got to do it. The days of Amazon coming early. But and he talked about that. He said people with mental conditions shouldn't be getting guns. Kids shouldn't be getting guns. He gave all the reasons we give today for people who have mental handicaps that are killing people, like this, a marital dispute or a mother-in-law dispute or whatever. I can't believe they're fairly common. You can't get rid of mother-in-laws, but I'm looking at the guns. And it was, as you say, sir, it was, he was in Roseburg, which later became the scene of a mass killing, and he's begging people, and I put that in a column in the Times 2 weeks ago saying, they always say right after the killing, let's not talk politics now.
Right.
Because they wait for 2 weeks when nobody's talking about guns. And of course, you got to talk politics. If it's an immigrant who shoots somebody, immediately Trump's talking about immigration law. So he doesn't have any problem jumping on the button and playing the political card immediately. You got to talk gun control when there's been a killing. That's when you do focus on things. But the right wing is so shrewd. They say, let's not talk politics now. Let's focus on the grieving now. Yeah,
Chris,
right.
A couple of weeks, this is beyond your book, but a couple of weeks after Bobby's death, there was a gun control bill introduced in the Senate. And I remember covering it and seeing the number of people who voted against it. People who I thought were liberal heroes. Phil Hart of Michigan, Mike Mansfield of Montana, Ed Muskie of Maine. And of course, I'm saying, how is this happening? And so somebody told me, said, hey, these are hunters. These are all...
John Dingell in Michigan.
Just amazing, the number of very liberal people.
Well, you know why, Marty? Because remember a great liberal senator from Pennsylvania named Joe Clark?
Oh, sure.
Gone. The gun issue, 68.
Yeah.
Gone. Goodbye.
Former mayor of Philadelphia. Yeah.
Of course, Joe Clark, and then he became a great liberal senator, a
Yeah,
friend of
yeah.
Bobby's.
And he came out
It's a killer issue because here's what it is. I mean, this isn't about my book. It's about fact.
Yeah.
Gun owners, like one of my brothers who lives up in Allentown, he's got 100 guns in his basement. You know why he has them? So when the government comes to get his guns, he can fight them. It's a little circular, but that's how Bruce looks at it. I love the guy, but he's on this issue. And you know what it is? That's the only issue he cares about. So the rest of us worry about war and health issues and good education and public schools and women's rights. And we try to talk about everything. We try to be well-rounded in our voting. They're not. They got one issue.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. I don't want to go back to Whitaker Chambers, but I do want to go back to one thing, and that is the Senate Labor Committee and Jimmy Hoffa, and the one common person that really you mentioned before that goes back to Trump, and that's Roy Cohn. And I'm just wondering the connection between Roy Cohn and the McCarthy period, which we know what happened there, but the Jimmy Hoffa piece and the Teamsters Union. Do you have a comment on that?
Well, from the other end, the Trump end is easy. Let's start with the McCarthy end. I mean, Bobby was Manichaean. We didn't know the word growing up, but he is and was Manichaean. He thought there was good and evil in this world. And he realized as he grew older that it could be complicated. You could really like a guy like McCarthy and see that he was the bad guy, Joe McCarthy. And he gradually came to that realization. McCarthy was wrong. In fact, all the mistakes McCarthy made as head of the permanent subcommittee in 53 and 4 and all that, Bobby said, I'm not going to replicate when he created the Rackets Committee. The Rackets Committee was only going to have witnesses who had been vetted ahead of time. They knew they were telling the truth. They checked them out on facts before they let them go on television before the committee, because he said once somebody come on, he said you can always find somebody to speak against somebody. So it's easy to destroy a reputation. That's easy. And he wasn't going to do it on the Rackets Committee. But he was going to get the bad guys like Giancana. He was going to get Dave Beck, and he was going to get Hoffa. He thought Hoffa was evil. He went up against Giancana, who was scary. And also people like Frank Kildorff, the Human Torch. There's a guy who was an arsonist who, when the police finally caught him because he torched himself, and he's lying in the hospital bed, and he's nothing but a piece of bacon, basically. And this, I believe, Catholic police officer came up to him and said, you're about to meet your maker. Why don't you come clean? And he said, fuck you. That's the kind of people he's up against.
Yeah.
That was the kind of people Bobby was up against.
Yeah.
And, of course, Giancana, of course, I think Bobby always worried about what role Giancana played in all the hell that came. I think Trump liked sleazy people like Roy Cohn. He liked to be out-sleazed. I just think he likes, excuse me, I don't want to get into libel here directly, but let's just say on another note, he loves Roger Stone, okay? He loves Roger Stone. He likes people that will do anything for him and who have no moral compass. And he sort of likes them. I don't think he has one. I don't think he's comfortable with people who have one. I've never heard him say that's wrong or that's right. I think we'd laugh if he heard him talking like that. I think people would just start chuckling. What's he know?
71 years old. He's never made a mistake yet.
He never made a mistake. He's never done anything wrong in his life, he said once.
Sure.
But Roy Cohn's just what he is. One time Roy Cohn was in that gallery in the House, and I was working for Speaker O'Neill. And I had to find out who got him that seat. So I go to the Sergeant at Arms. I shouldn't probably do this, but I went to the Sergeant at Arms and said, who gave Roy Cohn his seat to watch Reagan one night? It was Mario Biaggi in New York. I was interested in that one, too. But anyway,
sure.
Yeah.
There's a name from the past. I interned for Mario Biaggi in 1977.
Good. I'll bet it was interesting.
Barely saw him. But the question that I had was this. You were talking earlier about the likelihood of the success that Bobby Kennedy would have had in 1968 when he was running for president. I was 10 years old when he was murdered. I grew up in a very Irish Catholic working class neighborhood in Woodside, Queens. We would.
What's that?
There you go. Okay.
There you go, Queens County.
We went to the grammar school we went to. It was all nuns who were from Boston. Every single nun who was at the school was from the Sisters of Charity of Halifax, all from Boston.
Hey,
Sisters of Charity.
that's a good education. Don't get
You
me
know it.
started.
You
It
know
worked
it.
for me.
Okay.
Well, my two aunts were Sisters of St. Joseph.
Okay.
But I had the Mercy nuns who had the strangest name, Mercy nuns. We could never...
They didn't show much mercy.
Never figure that one out.
But the thing I remember hearing so much as a 10-year-old after the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, now this was a real Kennedy country type of place. Everyone was pro-Kennedy.
Okay.
But I remember the adults all talking about he didn't have a chance to win because what people forget is in 1968, you had to be 21 to vote. And what people in my neighborhood used to say was, he has too many supporters that aren't old enough to vote yet. And I was wondering if there's ever been anything to back that up or if that was just...
Well, it sounds right because the draft was 18. You had to register at 18. You started thinking about it at 18. I know that.
Yeah.
And it was all you thought about.
Right.
But I mean, I know the period quite well, and it was all anybody talked about. And it was, and the girls our age that were 18, they talked about it too all the time.
Right.
It was an environment in the air, and in a way, it made life pretty interesting. In a way, there's an edge in the air.
But they couldn't vote.
Well, Goldwater's one guy one of the only case, maybe the only case I ever heard of a senator changing his mind on the Senate floor. They were debating the 18-year-old vote, and somebody was saying, well, we're going to draft these guys. Can't they vote? And he said, you're right. I'm for it. So he changed his. He hadn't thought of it before, apparently, Goldwater, and he changed his mind on the floor. At least he said he did. So you're right. A lot of young guys would have voted against the war.
Over here.
Yeah, first of all, I'm a high school government teacher. So
Okay.
to give context to my question, much has been said about the role of journalism, particularly in the last election. And journalists, as both of you were in, a large part of your lives, the role of the journalists in an introspective kind of way, looking back at the campaign this past year, and the role that journalists now have to look at themselves and say, what's our responsibility in terms of either reporting something in a very straightforward way versus flat out saying what is being said, in this case, obviously our current president, is flat out wrong, is contradictory. And if you could, both of you perhaps address this in the context of the way journalism has changed, going back to the time of the 1950s and 60s, obviously with people like Scotty Reston and others that knew things and didn't report them necessarily. And, you can place this in the context, of course, with McCarthy's drinking and other things that were going on. So I say this in the context...
So the question, give me the essence
in
of
the
the
context
question.
of a government teacher, I guess, in high school, what would you say is our responsibility, either at the high school level or journalists, to bring this now? In other words, how will things change?
Well, we fact check. That's all we can do. We can't say vote for this guy or for that guy. By the way, the press has had, I've had my favorites, and the favorites we've had, with the exception of Obama, whom a lot of the press people, most press people liked. Our heroes were like Mario Cuomo. Our heroes were Cohen Powell, John McCain for a while. Our heroes never won. So the idea that we could put a thumb on the scale is ridiculous. I mean, I don't know how many times we questioned Trump essentially. I mean, I got him saying women should be punished for abortion, and I thought he was going down on the count of 10. He's out of here. Everybody said it for about an hour, and it was in the Kenya press, the Nairobi press, the German press within hours. Everybody said, "What? Some form of punishment? What's this guy? A torturer? What is he talking about?" And the stuff came out about Access Hollywood. We played it through the roof for hours and days and months. We played it through the roof. Everybody knew what he said about the P word. Everybody knew it, and they voted for him. It wasn't a lack of education. No. They hated the establishment so much. Yeah. They hated the Mitch McConnells, the low-energy Jebs, the little Marcos. They didn't like any. They liked the nicknames because they didn't like those people. Yeah. They looked down on them, and they looked down on the people on the Democratic side just as quickly. I'm telling you, the voters wanted a rebellion, and they got one. Now they got to live with the consequences. And still, it's high 30% who are sticking with them. Every night they stick with them. We check it. You can keep, this idea that if we yell louder, if we preach people, they'll change. That's not true. people are very independent. And they'll, you know, he said, I'll shoot people on Fifth Avenue and they'll still vote for me. Well,
Chris, you...
pretty close, and you know, it's not my fault.
Chris, you mentioned...
But I got to tell you, we'd watch his jokes. We laughed too when the camera was off. He was a clown and a good one.
Yeah.
And when the camera was off, we'd laugh at his stupid jokes and his nicknames, and it was high school all over again. But we all thought he'd lose.
Yeah.
And we found out later there are a lot of people say, oh, it was Hillary's fault. Well, this Hillary hatred didn't seem to emerge during the campaign. Nobody was talking about how they hated her then, and now all of a sudden afterwards they got to blame it on her. Maybe it was her, but it was something else. There was something else. They didn't want what we have. And they think that money machine, where it's just people talking to their donors all the frickin' time. Yeah. All politicians do now is hang out with their donors all day long on call time room. All they do is work the phone all day long, and somebody drives them over to vote once in a while. Then they drive them back, and they do a call time all day. And at nighttime, they go out with rich people and talk rich people talk. And so they get caught saying things like 47%, and they cling to their guns and their religion. And they say things like the deplorables, and they get caught on mic. I noticed that Gillespie got caught the other day talking about enemy territory in Northern Virginia. I wish we could always hear them off mic.
They're great.
Because the features they give us are just palaver. But if you catch them talking to the rich people, you hear them. And the regular people go, I think that's a party I haven't been invited to.
Yeah.
And by the way, the Democrats have been playing this game since Archie Bunker. Make fun of the working guy, the Irish guy from Queens. Make fun of him, and we'll all have a big joke about it. Make Meathead the smart guy. That's going to work. And after about 50 years of that crap, people said, you know what, I'm sick of that. I'm sick of Hollywood looking down its nose at us. I'm sick of the Democrats doing it. So I'm going to find somebody else to vote for. Somebody else as ticked off as I am. So they vote for this charlatan. You know? You don't like to hear it, but it's true.
Sir.
They got the message. You're below us.
Yes.
I'm not too good at this. I was 9 years old when Bob, when he...
I can't, we have to speak up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was 9 years old when, I'm Italian, so I grew up in an Italian neighborhood. I was 9 years old when he was killed, and my father was very, very upset because he said it was the first politician that didn't tell us what we wanted to hear, but told us the truth. Yeah. And faced us and made us look at ourselves. And I just want to thank you because you brought my father's words back.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, the two messages, sir, that I heard in my short but memorable period as a Capitol policeman were two messages. And this is an experience everybody should have being a cop for a while, even a Capitol cop. One is, I used to work with a lot of West Virginia guys. You know, they were double dippers. They're making $8,000 a cop. They had some military money coming from their MP days. And one of them, Leroy Taylor, was a pretty conservative guy from West Virginia, took me aside because he wanted to educate me, the college kid, to what life's all about. And he said, you know, Chris, you know why the little man loves this country? Because it's all he's got. And I remember that, and I want to always remember that. The deep patriotism of the guy who doesn't get many breaks in life. And the rich people with all their sophistication and assets don't always focus entirely on the gut patriotism of the little guy. And the other message I got was from the building superintendent, the guy who was the Capitol engineer who fixed light bulbs in the middle of the night and stuff like that and made things work. And he used to sit there every night watching senators go in to vote, taking the escalator up to the Capitol. He just watched them, like an anthropologist. Watch them. And he noticed one thing. Of all the Democrats, all the snooty liberals like Ribicoff and Fulbright, all the guys who knew how to walk like senators, they have a certain senatorial walk they had. Bobby was the only one who always made a point to say hello to the cops. And I never forgot that. They told me everything. Here's a guy known for his support, being a tribune of minorities, African Americans, Chicanos, as we call them, Native Americans. And yet here's the guy who identified with the policemen. And Jack Newfield wrote this. He said, Bobby's people were the cops, the waitresses, and the firefighters. They're my people. So even though he reached out to the minority people, he never betrayed his crowd, the ones he grew up with. Even though he was rich, he somehow, I think it's because the old man called him a runt and treated him like one, he somehow connected with people overlooked. Yeah. And that's why I wrote this book. And that's why the last page of the book is that picture, you know.
Chris, you mentioned President Obama a little while ago, and you've been critical of President Obama because he doesn't look much like politicians. I mean, critical of his congressional relations or lack thereof, as the case may be.
Well, I love the guy. He gave me a thrill up my leg.
I know, but that's we heard of that.
I don't deny it. He was
Okay.
thrilling. Best rhetoric, the most engaging, patriotic. I said right after his speech up here in Boston in 2004, he's the first African-American president, immediately on television. I thought he had the magic. He sort of withdrew over the 8 years. He just drew further away from us and from the politicians.
But he didn't like politicians. I mean, he didn't. He quite clearly. But
He didn't, I guess.
Bobby Kennedy, I asked him that about that. I said, "What do you think of your colleagues here?" He just was in a bad mood. He said, "Colleagues? There are 20 of them I wouldn't let into my living room." And he said, and there's one guy, this very earnest Midwesterner, if he punches me in the shoulder one more time, I'm going to punch him right in the mouth. And I said, well, how are you going to get along? He said, well, Teddy's going to help with that.
Teddy was good at it.
That was, Teddy, how many senators have you met who loved Jack, loved Teddy, and did not love Bobby?
I know.
A good.
The older
core.
people didn't. Tip didn't like him. Tip, my
No,
boss, Mr. Speaker, if you're listening, Mr. Speaker, I never call you Tip.
A lot of people from his district here.
He thought he was. Bobby was really good with people younger than him. He would bring up. He was really good at people, kids, little kids, and he was good at people coming along, like Wayne Owens, who was my first guy who first brought me in.
Utah.
And but he used to have. Remember that Southern senator who was complaining about Ralph Nader in one of the hearings, and he said, are the words too long for you, Senator?" That didn't help. But then he also said to Giancana, and Giancana was laughing at him. He says, "I thought only little girls giggled." Now he said this to a hitman. He hung people. It's like he was Lee J. Cobb and On the Waterfront. He was the guy that hung people up on hooks. You know, and he wasn't afraid of anybody.
Over here.
I'm a perennial optimist, having been Barney Frank's finance chair.
All right.
Good for you.
I have a question, and that is, who do you see on the horizon?
Oh, you're killing me.
Great question.
Well, I
Great
see
question.
Joe Kennedy down the road, and I think the great thing about him is, first of all, I met him at Nantucket this summer, and he said, I used to call people by their titles. I worked on the Hill. I believe in titles. They earned them. They got elected to them. And he and Monahan were the only two in my life who ever said, call me Pat or call me Joe. All the rest said, John Kerry, he never said, call me John. He just, he liked that. He deserved it. He earned it, Senatore, Just, but I like, look, I'm desperate, okay? So,
Are you the only one? I don't know.
I'm desperate. I like, for president, I guess you're saying.
Yes.
President of the United States, which we used to think of as way up here, remember?
Yeah,
Way up here. So the standard used to be way up here. Oh, God.
Who you got?
There are probably some that could be Jerry Ford. They could be placeholders. They could hold the job and not do anything wrong, okay? Biden's better than that. I'm saying it. He's a few notches above, wouldn't blow it. But I think he's a good guy, but he's a few notches above, wouldn't blow it. I know he's running. I think a ticket with him and Warren may work, but it's going to have to be a left-center ticket. That's my belief. The left is ascendant in the Democratic Party. It is really ascendant, much more than it was a year ago. And now it's really ascendant. And that you cannot deny people of color and people on the left a participation on the ticket. I don't think you can run two moderates and two white men, certainly. So I think to win against Trump, you have to put the country back together again of center-left, some center, and left. You got to put it together again. You got to get to 50%. You didn't have 50% last time. I said we. I'll say it again. We. You need 50%.
Is Joe Biden center or left? Good
well,
question.
I think his conditioning is regular people.
Yeah.
I don't. Whatever positions he may sign on to the Medicare for life or something. But I still think he's a reasonable guy who thinks through things. He's practical, and his people behind him are practical. I like Sherrod Brown.
Yeah.
I think he'll get reelected in Ohio.
Yeah.
He went to Yale, but he doesn't let it show.
And he doesn't tell you in the first 2 minutes?
No, he doesn't. I haven't gotten that. That's rare, but he doesn't. He has a good gravelly voice. He's like a labor guy.
Yeah.
I'm convinced, by the way, before you pick a candidate, you got to pick an issue, and I think it's public works. I really do believe the Democrats got to go back to where they got elected in the 30s, build stuff again, build the railroads again, fast rail across the United States, reunite the country, and stop pissing around with tax cuts. Because if all you stand for is, well, we really don't like that tax cut. If that's all you are, you're not going to drive anybody's dream. You got to rebuild the country, reunite the country, and I think building. I really do think this country has to build. And if you have been to anywhere on the Amtrak, I'm sorry, it's a joke.
Yeah.
And anywhere else in the world, they have fast rail that you put the Diet Coke on the little stand there, and it doesn't even rattle. And you're going 300 miles an hour, and we're going about 80, and you're in a buckboard. I'm telling you. The Amtrak is a joke going through Baltimore. The Union Station is pretty nice. Penn Station's a dump. A dump. Why is this country, the richest country in the world, have everything that's in public land a dump? And China, everything's beautiful. South Africa has a beautiful airport in Joburg. Europe, you go to Zermatt. I was there with my wife last year. We went up to the mountains of Switzerland. The trains are spectacular. Why can't we have a public sector again? And I think we just argue about the entitlement programs up there. You're never going to get anybody. We're going to argue about health care because we have to, but in the end, you got to build something. And I do think that the Democrats, I don't know what Chuck and Nancy are doing for a living. I mean, all they do is, well, we don't really agree with that. It's a whining party. It's not doing anything anymore. And you got to we built the Empire State Building in 31. We built the railroads in 60-something, in 1860-something. We built the Morrill Act, created scientific agriculture for the whole world with all the land-grant colleges during the Civil War. Yep. Eisenhower built the interstate commerce system during the do-nothing 50s, interstate highway system. We'd be taking county roads right now if it was this Democratic Party running the place. Yeah. You know, there wouldn't be a 95, a 70, or an 80, or a 93, any of that stuff. It would just be old roads. Hey, look, you got the big dig. You got it started here.
You bet.
You can rebuild the rest of the country on that model.
Worth every penny, and don't you forget it.
Worth every penny.
Sure.
So you mentioned earlier the way in which unity and empathy are really important for a president. You also mentioned that a lot of politicians these days are spending all their time in call rooms, and when they're on those phones, they're just talking with their people, right?
Donors.
Right. We spend more and more time today in echo chambers than we ever did, and one of the things Bobby did was he got outside his comfort zone, right? Whether it was with labor folks, whether it was the poverty tour in the South, he did a lot of those things. What opportunities are there for politicians to do that today? And what opportunities are there for constituents to get out and actually break down the echo chambers a little bit more?
Well, look, I just, I don't know. I think a lot of what happened to the economic unity of the Democratic Party was cut in half by social issues. And I know you can't, I'm pro-choice. I'm Catholic, but I've been pro-choice since I first got into the 70s. I just think, I don't believe in punishment. I think in the end, if you don't punish, it's not going to work anyway, so stop talking about it. It's just an argument. And I think the bathroom issue, the statues issue, I mean, the political leaders have got to find a way to include in their net, in their tent, people with different views, different sensitivities. I mean, Catholics will put up with pro-choice talk, even though we don't like the way it's talked about. Choice, I don't really like that word. I think you can be for legalization. You can be for tolerance and acceptance, but you don't have to like it. You don't have to say you like it. You don't have to say that it's not a moral issue when you think it is a moral issue. Like Nancy Pelosi won't ever, you can't get her to answer the question, which I agree with her on. You can't ask me what my philosophical and religious position is on abortion. She said, I won't accept the religious test. We have to find a way not to make those screaming issues divide an economic class. That's what I think. You got to find a way to say, yes, we disagree on that, and we're going to keep it our way, and we're going to win with a majority vote. And I do believe the country's certainly majority pro-choice. And I think the courts I think Judge Roberts is not going to mess with it. I just don't believe you. I don't think his wife will let him, and I don't think he's going to do it. I think she's Holy Cross, she's reasonable, she's Jesuit trained. And I just don't think the Jesuits want that to happen either. And I think that those of us who are Catholic know we live in a country that's diverse, and it's American, and it's about individual freedom primarily. That's the nature of this country, and we have to accept that and believe in it. But we also have to recognize that why we're fighting over this stuff. I didn't think Northam was right, and he'll probably squeak it in Virginia. He's the lieutenant governor running. He's a doctor. He's a good guy, but he's a little soft-spoken for me. But he's a little bit like Tim Kaine. Excuse me, Tim Kaine was a terrible choice for Hillary. It's horrible. She needed to run a guy like Sherrod Brown. Anyway, a Rust Belt guy. But I think they're wrong to argue about the statues issue. I think the statues issue is very hard to resolve because once you get into it.
What is this is the one that floors me.
Where are you going to, how do you end it?
I mean, liberal, whatever, the Democrats just say, well, we can't solve the problems of real living people, so let's go and beat up on dead people. I mean, Columbus.
It's impossible to unwrap it because it's our history. And you're going to go to Gettysburg Battlefield and get rid of Stonewall? I mean, he was on the battlefield. He was one of the generals. That's history. It's there. There were Confederate slave holders who were there. When you go to Mount Vernon, you see the slave quarters. You're going to get rid of them. It's part of our. I like the Brits on this one point. I like the Brits. They believe you put everybody into Westminster Abbey. Bloody Mary, Cromwell's outside.
Oliver Cromwell.
Henry VIII, they're all there because they're all part of history. Live with it.
Yeah.
And I think if you start unraveling, what do you get rid of Washington Lee University, change that name. Get rid of Lee Highway, get rid of Jefferson, get rid of that little Confederate soldier looking sad and south on the main street in Alexandria. And where are you going to stop? And I just think...
The only guy to survive, bet this, the next issue of the currency, if we apply these rules, James Buchanan will be on the $10 bill. Why? Because he didn't do much of anything.
You can't have Jackson. He killed Indians.
He didn't kill Indians. He didn't do. I mean, he didn't. Anyway.
We're going to perdition here. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think you made the pointer. We made some pointers.
Who's next?
But I think the answer is to stop arguing over stuff that will never end. Right. The trouble with cultural fights is, almost by definition, they will survive the two people arguing. Yeah. Those fights will still be there when you're both dead. So what's the point?
Okay.
I mean, I just think at the end you got to agree on. We can agree on minimum wage. We can agree on trade issues. We can negotiate taxes. We can work out things with numbers. We can work out a lot of good things. But most important, we got to get positive about government again. Simple. Just change it over from negative to how much don't we tax to how much can we do. Yeah. And I really think that fight has been lost because the Democrats don't fight it. And the unions, construction unions.
Over here.
Library, but I'm asking a question for someone watching on Twitter. So they're asking, what is one thing you learned about Robert Kennedy while writing this book that you didn't know before?
Wow. A lot, I would think.
God.
I learned a lot, and I knew the guy. So
I learned a lot about, well, I knew he was really religious. I knew he was Catholic in the sense of understanding good and evil. And I knew he went to church and he raised his kids as Catholics. And I know he was religious in a devotional sense.
A novena Catholic, he called himself.
He understood. He understood. Even Jack, who was pretty secular, would always go stop off and light a candle for his brother or kneel at the grave. He was very devotional when it came to his family. So he had a very strong religious connection to his family, whatever else was going on in his head. And he also wanted to go to church every week. And I'm like this too. It's a better week if you've been to church. Okay, nobody believes that anymore, I guess. I believe that.
That's good.
And I think Jack thought that. Bobby became, at the end, sort of interested in the Dorothy Day Catholic worker Catholicism, the radical concern about the poor. And he was really taken
Michael Harrington's book.
Michael Harrington's book.
Holy Cross.
And he sat down with Robert Coles, the Harvard psychologist, and he would talk about his colleagues. He was trying to figure them out too, but about what poverty does to kids. Kids grow up with distended stomachs. We know that when they're eating nothing but molasses down in the Delta. And he was trying to learn all that, but he was also trying to figure out what was the religious motivation behind somebody like Cesar Chavez. What role is Catholicism play in his getting up in the morning and leading a labor movement out in the California fields? How did that move Dorothy Day living down in the Bowery in New York? How did that move her? He wanted to find a connection between his religion and his purpose. He really wanted to figure out life as he understood it. And I thought that was something that got to me. I thought he's the genuine article. I mean, he's not perfect, obviously, but I wasn't looking for that.
Over here.
Yeah. Hi, Marty. Hi, Chris. I teach AP U.S. History and U.S. History High School in Enfield, Connecticut. And I like to think all of my lessons are crucial, but I think a particular lesson that's crucial is on the '68 campaign, and we focus on Bobby's campaign. The question I have for you, and we've talked about the Democrats, and I proudly call myself a Bobby Kennedy Democrat, with a reason. So we'll move on from that. But what do we need to do? And I'm using a metaphorical phrase here, but it's a real question. What do we need to do collectively as a people for the future of our country, for the present and future of our country, to move on to Chicago?
Well, that, of course, you're alluding to his great line.
His
at the
last
end.
words.
His last words. And
The ambassador
well, one
of God.
lesson you can learn about life is that people don't know when it's going to end. And we read history backwards as you teach it backwards. But in real time, Bobby was looking to the future that night. And I think we have to remember that about all these figures. Jack was smiling and sunny that day in Dallas. He was on top of the world. His beautiful wife with him, people cheering him. Life was good. He had to put up with some of the local politics, but that's something he liked to do. He's in the car that day talking to Jim Wright. I got it from him saying, how come Dallas is so right-wing and Fort Worth so yellow dog Democrat and it has to do with its economic structure? He's trying to figure it out all the time. He was a real... And I left that chapter by saying Bobby wanted to go on. He dearly wanted to go on. He had found his place, that he was going to be a tribune of the working people, the minorities, and he was going to fight that fight. And then somebody shot him. And I think the message is you don't know when your string's going to run out. And if you're doing something good, it's, you know, I've been trying to figure out what Bobby's last words were, because it's not easy to figure it. It's not. Jackie once said of Jack when he died that he had that look in his face that he had when he was figuring out a difficult question, and he was coming out with a difficult but clever answer, and he had finally figured it out. Jack knew he'd been shot in the head. He knew what was going on. Bobby knew what was going on in those split seconds, and he knew. He said, "Is everyone else all right?" Which I thought was very telling. And then he was saying, and this I thought were his last words, but they were very ambiguous. They were trying to move his body, and he's going, no, no. And that could have been just reaction to the pain of being lifted up. But also, the reason I fastened on that is because when Jack died, Bobby went to the Lincoln bedroom and stayed. He wanted to stay in the White House that night. He's close to his brother in a way. His brother was there dead, and he wanted to be in the White House. And Chuck Spaulding took him to the Lincoln bedroom and listened outside to Bobby. And Bobby inside wasn't just praying, he was talking to God. He was asking questions. Why? He was real, and the one thing about this book that's different than all the other, I think, is about his soul and trying to figure him out. And I think for students, the first lesson I'd tell them was life is short, be careful. And you better get your thing done, whatever it is. And he was at least trying to do his thing. He said something about race, which I thought was great. He didn't say love each other. He's not Jesus. He said, make an effort. Just, you know, say hello to other people, different backgrounds, whatever you... That's what I think we all try to do. Just try to be nice. Just try to be good people about differences and try to, hey, how you doing today? Or, you know, in Washington we say, how about those skins? You know, it's pretty sad, but we do make that effort. But the idea of making an effort, I thought, he said it the night King was killed, make an effort. I thought it's still works in 2017, I think.
Here, sir.
Hello. I'm coming from a little bit of a different point of view from this gentleman. I'm on the student perspective in an AP course on government at my high school. And we're studying how the parties change their issues over time. And I was wondering what you think today's Democratic Party could learn from the legacy of Bobby Kennedy.
Unite.
Boy, stand for something.
Unite, don't, and stand for something positive the government can do. Let's face it, the Democratic Party is the government party. The Republican Party has staked its history on opposing government, cutting taxes, doing less, deregulating, cutting programs, trashing government in name all the time, hating Washington all the time. I think the Democrats have got to pick it up and say, look, we believe in all these things we've tried to do. We haven't done it perfectly, but if it weren't for us, there wouldn't be Social Security, there wouldn't be Medicare, there wouldn't be minimum wage, there wouldn't be anything. There wouldn't be organized labor, there wouldn't be anything. And the Democratic Party should take a little credit. And if it wasn't for us, you know, a lot of these things wouldn't happen. It was a Democratic president that got civil rights through and voting rights through back when the Republicans were okay on that issue. But they led the way. And I think they got to be positive. Stop being just sitting around waiting for the Republicans to push a tax bill that they can vote against. I'm sorry. By the way, the tax bill's not going to pass. So don't worry about it. It's not going to pass.
No question.
It's not going to pass.
Sir.
Chris?
Yes.
Yeah, we took a turn right up from New Jersey and did take Amtrak, so thanks for reminding us. We're going back. But Bobby Kennedy seemed to have had two kind of characters. The pre-1963, where he was the pit bull, the fighter.
He was. Yeah.
And then after 1963, it was like he had a revelation. He changed. 1968, I was 18. And at that point, we were in early spring, we were kind of for McCarthy, simply because he did take on Johnson in the war.
Yeah.
And then Bobby came along, and it was almost like it felt a little too late.
We get to the
I
question.
know about
to
that.
jump.
So-
The question is that, again, hypothetical, had Bobby gotten into the race the same time as Gene McCarthy, would that, you think, would have had
Well, he
made a
wished he had.
difference?
Oh, yeah.
The only thing I can tell you is I was for Gene until I was for Bobby.
Yeah.
And in the end, I was for Bobby because I thought he's the only guy that could win, because Gene wasn't going to win. He wasn't going to win the nomination or anything. But I thought that something I learned asking the young guy's question. Here's something I really did learn. I always thought Gene was the nervy one, the gutsy one.
Yeah.
And then I realized Gene was probably on his way out anyway. Gene was going to quit anyway. He was bored to hell with politics. He wasn't an idealist about it at all. Bobby knew that he had the presidency locked for 72. All he had to do was play ball. And the Johnson people and the rest would have given him the presidency, which he dearly wanted. He wanted to restore Camelot, the new frontier, to bring the Kennedys back to the White House, restore what his brother had created, and get going again. That's what he really wanted to do. And in running in 68, I have a whole part of it called the sacrifice. He really was saying, I'm risking it all. I'm going into the race the day before St. Patrick's Day, way late in the race. I can't even enter a bunch of the primaries. It's too late for Wisconsin. I've missed New Hampshire. I can enter Nebraska, Indiana, California, and Oregon. That's about it. And then I got to take on Hubert for the inside backroom boys. I'm probably not going to win this, but so I think he did wish he had done it. He missed the A students, he said. I didn't like the way he said it, but he meant it. The A students. They were all with McCarthy.
Yeah.
I think he wished he'd gone in earlier.
Yeah.
But, woulda, coulda, shoulda. I hear it at home all the time.
In this period, I must quote the pride of Rosendale, Mary McGrory, who said of Bobby reacting to Gene McCarthy's success in the primaries, she said, the young people, Bobby went after them as like a Victorian father whose daughter has run off with a dustman. I mean, that was Mary McGrory's version of it. And she knew both. She knew Bobby and she knew Gene, and it was a great time.
Except she loved the dustman.
Yes, she did.
Well, first, I'd like to thank you, Chris, and your colleagues at MSNBC for keeping us sane and talking about facts and not fake, which is really important. Now, I'd like
they're
to...
nice people, by the way. The ones especially Rachel.
Yeah.
I mean, you may not know what. As a regular person to be with, she's great as a person. She's great. She just is great, and she knows who she is. She's a leader, smart as anybody around, and incredibly nice. I think that means a lot if you work with somebody to know that as a fact.
So here's the hard question. Putting on your crystal ball, what do you, with all your experience in politics and being an observer for a number of years, what do you think is going to happen? Mueller is going to find out more problems and holes and than we can keep. We can keep on 24 hours with news breaks. Do you think that Trump will have an impeachment? Do you think we will have him around for 8 years? What do you see?
Well, that all depends on an election. Look, I know this. I think about that question, sir, all the time.
Sure.
I think Mueller is the best possible prosecutor we could have. I think he's great. I think somehow, serendipitously, after Comey got sacked, somehow the institution of the FBI rose him up. Somebody who believes in the independence of if you've ever seen the new Mark Felt movie, it's pretty interesting. And it's about the institutional pride of the FBI. Don't mess with us. Don't tell us what to do, Mr. President. Stay. John Dean shows up in the movie, and they see him. What are you doing here? How dare somebody from the White House come to the FBI and tell us what to do? So I think he'll do what I think he will do is by the time he's done, a year from now, I don't know how long, I hope it's within a year, we will know any dirt there is we will get all the dirt because he will squeeze Manafort. The guy's 70. He's threatening him with the rest of his life in a tough prison. He is threatening him with that if he doesn't talk. And whatever he's got about collusion, whatever he's got about obstruction, we're going to get it. Or else Manafort's going away for 100 years. It's just a fact. Now he's going after Flynn. He's threatening, I believe, threatening Flynn's son, saying if you don't talk, your son's going away. And I would think Flynn, probably being a good guy, is saying to himself, I don't want my son ever indicted. So they float the idea, they're ready to indict, but not indicting. So he's squeezing and squeezing. And then he'll go elsewhere. I think he's going to try to find anybody on that list of the Russian-connected people and the people around him. I think he might go after Jared, too, at some point. And I think, what I think is, at least those of us who are suspicious of a Russian collusion will be satisfied when he's done that if there is any, he will have caught it. I think that's the good thing for the country. He will catch. I don't think this guy who has not a hair out of place, who has a perfect resume, who carries that attaché case around with him like it's got bullion in it, you know. He always leans into it, you know, just to show how heavy it is. If I were Trump, I'd be scared to death of anything I did wrong. So I think every night that Trump's capable of self-inspection. If he is, he's thinking, now, what did I say to Michael Flynn?
Or loyalty to his own. Nixon had more loyalty.
Well, Nixon believed that Nixon had something this guy doesn't have, which I think is critical. Nixon knew what great presidents were. He looked up to John Kennedy in a strange way, but he did. He wanted to be a president like him. And he knew what shame was. Nixon, I'm no Nixon hater because I think Nixon felt 100% shame for what he'd done. He knew he had blown it morally. And I think his family knows it. He knows it. The people who like Nixon know it. And he was never going to be a happy man after that, whereas Trump is oblivious to right and wrong. That I can tell. Can you disagree with me here? I don't know.
Let's get a couple more here, Chris. Over here.
Okay, thanks. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Okay, I have a big question, and I think we're all pilgrims here. We all came to worship at the Kennedy leadership altar that we were raised on, that we still embrace, that we tried to instill
He was
in
an
our
altar
children.
boy. He can do it in Latin.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I've got 4 kids back in Chicago. 2 of them are attorneys, and they have my JFK posters hanging in their offices. And they're doing good work. But you know what? There's not enough of the next generation out there. They're not called to the same level that we were.
To service.
Yeah. And how do we? Okay, here's the question: how do we make the leadership leap from the Kennedys and this book, what you wrote about, to where the next generation is, where they're going to take this country?
Well, I'm
so
hoping
we can
the
get
book,
past
look,
the Trumps,
I'm hoping
okay?
people read the book for a lot of reasons. I wrote the book, I worked very hard on it for years, and Marty knows how hard I worked. I wanted to get people to remind themselves of what we can have, what's possible. A leader with a moral compass, a leader that tries to unite us, somebody with a soul. I think we've forgotten that. I think it's now becoming Trump and anti-Trump. And I don't believe life in politics is a seesaw. I don't believe because one guy goes down, the other side's going to go up. There can be a general decline we're in right now. I mean, a real decline of prospects, of decency.
Both parties.
One hand called it the defining deviancy down. Where we just get, this has become as good as it gets. And some middleweight Democrat comes along and squeaks out a victory in the Electoral College over Trump. Gee whiz. I'm hoping people remember ideals. Because we grew up with them. There are ideals. You can be a Goldwater conservative and have ideals. It doesn't have to be on the progressive side. A lot of that libertarianism is a real ideal to it, which is people are better off being free as possible. And I understand that ideal. And I understand the progressive ideals too. And I think we got to be reminded of them. We don't have ideals right now. But I do think there's some people out there. Look, I'm going to build some people up right now. I think Sherrod Brown's good. I'm watching, what's her name?
From where?
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris from California.
I'm watching. I had dinner with her at Margaret Carlson's house a couple months ago. And I looked at her. I'm pretty tough on these guys, and I'm staring at her. I'm still with Cory Booker. I go, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm watching. You know, I think Elizabeth has to broaden her focus much more than just Wall Street. She's got to get a broader Brandwidth or whatever the hell. She's got to think a lot more things, take on different issues. But she told me at lunch a while ago, I'm not a socialist. She wanted me to know that. I'm not Bernie. And I'm a Democrat. She wanted me to hear both. I mean, I think she was working me. I know what I wanted to hear. I want to hear you're a Democrat. I want to hear that you're not a socialist, and I want to hear you got some positive thinking going. And I think she can probably take Trump on right there.
Yeah.
Millennials and the Gen Xers
Well,
involved. Okay.
It's hard.
Good question.
My son and his wife, she's a lawyer. She's on the Reporters Committee looking up for First Amendment rights. My daughter-in-law. Gave up a big job with Disney to do it. I mean, there are people that are, I know they're actually more altruistic than I would like as the father-in-law, okay? A little too altruistic, all right? I would have stayed with the money line, but she's now doing this, and I'm impressed by it. I think some of the old ways of showing my son went over and worked in what do you call it, in Rwanda with the Clinton Global thing, you know, working on keeping the drugs from getting in the hands of the people that usually sell it to Europe at cheap rates, and he just was the quartermaster of drugs over there for a while, 5 months. I think young people want to do stuff. Yeah. I think I would recommend to anybody who's 22 and can take it to go out in the third world again and go in the Peace Corps. I'm telling you, it'll change your life, change mine.
This may be the last question, but
it's tough.
Let's hear it.
I'm going to back up a little bit. In your book, Chip and the Gipper, where politics worked.
Yeah.
Can you see anything like that happening? Is there anybody in the Congress that can work together and build relationships?
Wow. Short
When
answer?
who was it that told me this? Yeah, I don't like Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania politically, but that's all right. I mean, Chris Dodd once said to him, the best advice you can give a new member of the Senate is to find something in common with somebody on the other side of the aisle, one other person, and they become your sounding board. And they can read for you on the phone every day. What's going on with your party? What's going on? I got to figure you guys out. And they can be your helpful hand in learning how to negotiate with the other side, what they care about. Find somebody you can talk to that nobody else knows about. You know what I mean? I've got senators who call me, I know that I can ask them for information because I never talk about them.
Yeah.
I don't talk about them, but they tell me what's going on.
That's good. George
You have
Mitchell,
to do that. You have to do that.
George Mitchell and Bob Dole.
Yeah.
Never said a bad word about each other, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, George.
Is there someone that can step up in the House like Tim Ryan? And, you know,
I like
that's
Tim
a
Ryan.
Rust
You
Belt
got
guy.
the right guy. You got the right guy. You're smart already. No, you got him. You got the answer to your question, Tim Ryan.
Yeah.
And but I think Nancy won't quit until Steny quits. And I mean, I'm kidding you. It's a gerontocracy.
Yeah.
Steny, she will not. They were interns together with Senator Brewster of Maryland 1,000 years ago.
That's right.
And they are still competing. And as my buddy Jim Moran said, from up here, he said, she won't even give him one term. Do you understand? Yeah. She won't leave it. I mean, Tip knew it's time to give Jim Wright. He told people around the office, he said, I got to give Jim Wright his chance to be Speaker. They don't want to leave. Jim Clyburn's not going anywhere. 3 of them in their mid-70s. Yeah. You know, it's really strange. Mike Crowley from Queens wants the job, and he probably will get it, but I don't know. Or Joe Crowley. Joe Crowley.
Crowley.
Nice name, though. Joe Crowley. Anyway.
Okay, quick one. Make it quick, please.
Quick one. I grew up in Philadelphia, and I was 10 when Jack was killed, and 15 when Bobby was killed. And Jack sort of made us proud, and Bobby made us care. I remember me and my friends in high school, we mobilized around ideas and ideals. And you were saying something about that just a few minutes ago, the person in front of me. Yeah. And I'm just curious, how do we get the dialogue back on ideals?
Dialogue on ideals. Wow.
Read a book.
That's a tall order.
That's what I wrote the book for. I just try to get people back to think of what could be. And it's as simple as that. I don't have all these answers. I just know I love history. I love politics. I love political history, as Marty knows, for the last... I think the Kennedy period was astounding. Yeah. I can't think of anybody else to write about now, except those two guys. And even Nixon, in a squirrely way, is fascinating. Oh, yeah. He just is. Most of our presidents are basically dull.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, nobody wants the secret life of Ronald Reagan. I learned that. They don't want the secret life of Barack Obama.
Jimmy Carter.
To men, they're all on the private side, Jerry Ford, you know?
Yeah.
On the private side, they're not that interesting. And, but the Kennedys are.
Yeah.
And they just are. Even Joe Kennedy, old man, was ferocious, but he was fascinating.
Oh,
yeah. And the women in that family are amazing. Sarge Shriver's a hell of a story.
Yeah.
Hell of a story. And Eunice, who was really Jack, same person, Sarge told me. He said if she was a male, it would have been something to watch.
Okay.
So, but
Well, here in the...
Adlai Stevenson, I could write a book about him, but I would sell 10 copies. And everybody who bought it would be older than time, you know, and I know they'd enjoy the hell out of the book.
And that's just Keith Hoffa, who would sell 3 copies.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, well, here in the library of...
We got one more, don't we?
Oh, okay, if it's okay, please, one more.
Nice. All right. So my name is Jean Costello. I'm here in my U.S. history class. And obviously I'm a pretty young guy, and I'm also a Catholic, technically.
Technically.
Don't say that. Don't say you were raised Catholic. It
Yeah,
drives
don't
me
say that.
crazy.
Don't backslide
Say
on all
you're
those
Catholic
things.
or drop
Yeah.
it. Just one way or
Says
the
RC
other.
in my dog tags. That's my favorite thing.
Don't tell my mom, but I don't usually go to Mass. But so basically, also being a Catholic, especially recently, I've realized that, you know, life, it truly is, it's a gift, and no one can really know when actually it ends. So you kind of mentioned that Bobby could relate to the young people, and I didn't grow up with them. Obviously, like I said, I'm kind of young, but so my question is, how do you think, based on how Bobby lived, someone like me could grow up nowadays where, you know, empathy and unity isn't really as prevalent as it used to be, especially with, you know, like you said, the president nowadays. But so how do you think someone like me could grow from and learn from how Bobby lived?
Well,
Start with this.
I think, let me just tell you this. You say you're not a Catholic, fine. That's all what's going on today anyway. So I think if you go into public life, don't expect to develop values once you got there. You don't learn them in Washington. You don't learn right and wrong in D.C. You better know it before you get in the door. You're going to learn the ways of trickery and getting ahead and kissing up to the right people and all the wrong values in the world you'll pick up in Washington. You'll learn how to get things, you'll learn slipperiness and learning who to kiss and who you can dump on.
Okay.
And so you don't want to go, so work on your values. And then you'll be strong when you go to work because you need them walking in the door. And that's been my experience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Ron?